Hey everybody, it's Leanne again, back with another video, and this is my little dog Chico who wanted to say hello. When I was trying to do this voiceover, he kept coming in and trying to go up on my legs, so I decided I would introduce him to you. There is actually a video on my channel of him when he was a tiny little puppy, but now he is 3 years old. He'll be 4 in January. And this is just a knitting elf pattern that is going up on my blog today. It's a freebie for making this little elf ornament, so make sure you check that out. Today we're going to be making our DIY Christmas cards. Now you could do this process for yourself just by using my simple steps to make something really easy, or you can go to my blog and download the free PDF of this card that we make together and make some of your own using this image. I'm just going to walk you through the steps of what I do for this Christmas card, show you how simple and easy this can be. All you need is a few Christmas stamps, some white embossing powder and some Versamark emboss ink to make a really wintry pretty background. So I'm just using an anti-static cloth here to make sure I wipe away any static that may make my embossing powder stick where I don't want it to, and I'm using just a little selection of stamps that have come from my stash. I picked just little stars and snowflakes from many different sets, and I'm going to randomly print them all over this piece of cheap watercolor paper. It's not a particularly expensive piece of watercolor paper. Now anywhere I put the Versamark ink, I'm using this white glitter emboss powder just to cover it up and then shake off the excess. And when you heat set embossing powder, it gets a little bit brighter and it also becomes water resistant. So the idea is to cover the background in some stars and snowflakes so that when we paint over our background, they will still stand out and will show up through our paint. So I'm just putting them all over the paper, changing from stamp to stamp. And every time I've done a few, I'm just covering them with the powder, shaking that off and then heat setting those. And you can do as many or as little shapes in the background as you want. I want quite a full background because I'm not going to be using this entire background in the finished card design. So I'm giving myself plenty working space, just so when I scan this image to make the card, I've got lots to play around with and cut and move my image around. I'm just heat setting these once more. Now you could stamp everything at once, then add the embossing powder and heat in one go, but I'm quite a clumsy crafter and would probably end up knocking the emboss powder if I leave it wet, so I'm just heat setting as I go. I had something like 5 or 6 different stamps that I could work together to make this scene. Some were not even Christmas stamps, some were just little stars and shapes that could possibly be snowflakes, and I just added them to my background to fill in all the gaps. I love the fact that this embossing powder has a little bit of sparkle. It looks like a lot when you first shake it onto the paper, but most of the glitter does tend to fly away when you heat set it, and it just leaves a very small amount in the white emboss powder. So now that that's all heat set and I have enough, I'm going to get out my watercolour palettes. This one on the left is just I think it's a Darwin one, and this metallic one I just purchased recently from AliExpress. It was about £10 for this metallic watercolour set, and I'm really loving it. It is better quality than I thought it would be. I'm soaking my whole paper with some clean water using a spray bottle, and I also sprayed some water on my paints just to get them activated. Now I'm putting some extra fresh water across my whole piece of paper with my brush because I wanted this paper really saturated. The wetter the paper, the more my paint is move and make this an even simpler background. I'm going to start with my darkest sort of turquoise blues and just begin working them onto the paper. I'm not being very specific, I'm just literally slapping them on the paper and letting the water do all the work for me. I have my paper taped down to a board, but I applied so much water to this quite cheap water paper that it ended up a bit warping anyway, so it doesn't really matter if you tape your paper down. If you're going to use the process like I am where you scan your image when you're done, then it doesn't really matter. The only reason I would use a better quality water paper and keep it flat is if I was going to use my image directly on a card itself without scanning and printing it off. I'm just applying blue, purple, lighter blue, darker blue, and some sky tones. I'm thinking wintry. What are those lights called? The Northern Lights. Aurora Boreal, I should know because I used to live in the north of Scotland where you can actually see the Northern Lights. I'm just thinking of those colours when I'm applying this. Now it looks pretty strong here just now, but as you can see, as soon as I dry it, it pales right down because there was so much water that my watercolours were diluted. So that's the first layer. And this is a really simple technique. There is no skill required, no watercolouring skill. You completely dry your first layer so you've got a nice even pastel base, and then we are going to apply those same colours directly onto a waterproof mat. Now my whole desk is covered in a waterproof mat. You'll see in a moment when I move this. My whole desk is covered in this waterproof mat, so I'm just going to apply my paint directly to that mat. And now it's not very watery this time, it's quite a concentrated colour. I'm just putting down the colours that I used, and I'm not putting them in any particular order. I just want them all beside each other. And then I'm going to spray them with some water to make them a little more diluted and move around, and I'm just going to dab my paper right on top of that. I'm going to move my paper around and just press it down on that colour until I've covered pretty much every single inch of my paper. And when I finish taking colour, I'm going to clean that and put my paper down. Now I'm just going to use a baby wipe to dab up any areas that I felt there was too much colour, but as you can see, it's a really great effect. And any white gaps that have been left have been caught by that first layer of pastel watercolour, and it just makes a really stunning background. Now I'm just taking some darker watercolour to my edges. Now I didn't really need to do this because when I scan my image, I'm not really going to use the edges, but it's just habit that I've got into from doing art journaling, that I tidy up the edges of my paper when I'm doing any sort of artwork. I'm just applying all the same colours that I used in the background around the edge, just to bring that edge in and make it not look like I'm painting on a border. And while I'm at it, I'm adding colours to areas that I feel need a little extra help. Now when it comes to watercolours, and if you're watering down your paint, remember it does dry back a little lighter than it first appears on the paper. And that will come with using your watercolours often so that you know how they're going to react and how light they're going to dry. I use the set on the left quite regularly, so I know with the intensity of the colour how it's going to appear when it's wet. I'm just throwing on some of my white emboss powder while my page is still damp, and what that's going to do is little speckles will adhere in places that the paper's wet, and when I heat set it they will appear like little fine snow. So in just a couple of steps we've got a really nice background, and I'm just taking some of the metallic white that is on that palette to the right and adding little dots here and there just for extra shine. If you wanted to stop here and scan this as your background, you could just add some words to this on the program that I'm going to show you when we get to that stage, and use this really pretty background just with a sentiment, and that would make a really nice Christmas card. But I want a little bit of a focal point, so once I have finished adding all these little silver dots, I'm going to completely dry my page and make sure there's no moisture left at all. And then I am going to take some spare card. Oh sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I take my spare card, I'm going to put a base on my background. I want to make like a snow ground for my focal point to sit on, so I'm just taking some white acrylic paint here now that my background is finished and covering up a small section at the bottom with white acrylic paint. Now because I'm using white acrylic over watercolours, it will tint the first couple of layers of acrylic paint, so I end up giving this a few 3 or 4 layers, and then switching to gesso just to get a nice solid white. Make sure it's completely dry between my layers, and when I've done my final layer of gesso, I put that aside so that I could work on my focal point. Now for easiness, I'm just using a stamp. I give it one trial stamp first just to get rid of any dust because it's been sitting in a box, and then I'm just going to print it in a really light brown. This is Vintage Photo by Tim Holtz, just because I'm not really wanting harsh black outlines. I'm going to take my watercolors and I'm just going to fill this in extremely simply. I'm not going for a really detailed piece for this card. I want a soft watercolor hand-drawn look, so I'm just going to fill this in quite simply, and I'm going to be quiet and let you watch the colouring in. I like to use gel pens and other mediums when I'm doing artwork like this and add back all the little details and just define things. I just think it makes it look better when it actually comes to being scanned, and just add a little dimension to the tree. Your focal point does not need to be overcomplicated or particularly wonderful. I'm going for a soft hand-painted watercolor look when I am making these cards, so I'm not trying to be very specific. If you're planning on doing anything like and using a lot of water in a piece like this, make sure you do actually use watercolor paper. It's designed to be able to handle a lot of water, and non-watercolor paper or card might not handle the water, might break through your paper or turn into a little the more you work on it. So make sure you opt for a watercolor paper if you're going to be doing this. Okay, so this is how it looked once it was scanned. I scanned mine on really high resolution, and then I took it to canva.com, which is a free program that you can upload pictures and edit. I've just cropped out the part of the picture I wanted, added some words here which say happy holidays, and they had a free snowflake template frame that I've added to the front. You can't really see it well in the picture here, but the white on the ground has snowflakes too, which just looks really pretty in the flesh. I'm going to cut out one of the pieces and show you how I'm assembling my cards made from these. And like I said before, if you're not going to do this for yourself, there will be a free PDF of this page where you can print off the 4 cards with the 4 sentiments at the bottom. So I'm cutting this out exactly the size that I have printed it, and I'm taking some complimentary scrapbook here. I tried out a few different papers before I settled on this. Because I'm making a few cards, I've picked a couple of versions of the same colour of paper, and I'm going to be making a few variations. Now these cards are going to be posted through on my neighbour's store, which is a tradition here every year. All our neighbours give each other Christmas cards. So this is my offering this year. Now I'm going to go back in with my metallic gel pens and just add some details to my card that were lost in the scan. Sometimes golds, when you scan them, can be printed off and look a little more brown, so I'm just adding that metallic back. Now I always like to add some extra details to things that I print off, even if it is my own artwork. I just think it adds a little bit more special to the project that you're doing, makes it a little more handmade. I'm showing you here that I've put some sentiments on the bottom that you could cut out or use in any way that you see fit if you don't like the fact that they're printed on the background. I'm just cutting this out, showing you that you could then stick this on some foam adhesive which will prop it up, and you could then put it right on the card at the front over where it already says it on the card. You could use inks to stain this, but I'm sticking with it as it is. I like this look. I'm going to stick this whole panel on foam tape and prop it up away from the scrapbooking paper. Dimensioning a card just gives it a look of luxury. I'm just peeling my tape there. And I'm going to position it on this paper, leaving myself a little border, and then I'm going to trim the rest of my paper to give myself the same border all the way around. Okay, this is when you would get out the cards that you're going to be using. I'm just putting some blue watercolor pen on the edges because I don't like my cut edges to be white when I'm using coloured paper. So I'm just taking a blue tone that looked quite similar when it was applied to the paper and just taking it along my edges. And I'm going to get my card base out that I'm going to be using. Now because this is a custom size. I'm going to cut my card to suit. And I should have measured it and done it the right way, but I'm a bit of a cowboy that never measures anything. I like to wing most things, so I'm just eyeballing it by using my card, setting it down to see how much of a border I want around, and then I'm going to trim my paper to length. And then I'm going to get out my card making platform thing. I'm not even sure what it's called. A scoring plate, maybe? Yeah, a scoring plate is what we're going to call it. I'm going to figure out how much of a border I want on my card, lay it out, and I'm just turning my card over there because I realised there was like a raggedy edge that I don't want. And I'm going to figure out where I'm going to score it. Score my card. I mean, you could use pre-bought bases for this, or you could just use your own. Make your own cards like I'm doing. Either works equally as well. And then I'm going to trim off the extra card. I'm just checking that it's the right size. And I was a little bit squint with my cut at the bottom of my paper, so I'm going to trim two sides while I'm putting this together. If I had measured it, then I probably wouldn't be squint, but like I said, measuring is for the weak. I'm only kidding. Measuring is probably a smart person's way of doing things, but I never said I was smart. So I'm using roller adhesive here just to cover the whole back of that little panel, and I'm going to stick that to my card front. And yeah, again, look how squint the bottom of my card is, but we're going to ignore that for the time being while I add some glossy accent type liquid with Mod Podge Dimensional Magic, and then I'm going to take a little pokey tool and spread it out to the edges of my stars. And these little details make the world of difference on your card. The little finishing details can take it from a bog standard nice card to a really luxury, much nicer card. I'm adding some Wink of Stella in clear glitter to just the top edge of my snow there. And it could be done and finished here, but I like to go a little extra when it is Christmas stuff. Now this is when I decide that really squint edge is really bugging my happiness, and I attempt to use my trimmer to trim it off, but it's just too small an edge to get my trimmer working there. It just keeps pushing my card away. So I end up with a good old-fashioned pair of scissors and just taking off that bottom edge. My videos are really good tutorials on what not to do when making crafts, so you should take heed. Use a measuring tape, use a ruler, or if you wing it like me, have scissors to hand because you know you're going to make something squint. Okay, so it would be finished there and that would be perfectly nice, but I like to add back all the shine and sparkle. I'm just taking a silver metallic pen to add some of my little snow drops, snowballs, snowflakes, I don't know, back in. Make them stand out and shine. It's not really noticeable on camera, but in the flesh it's much nicer. And now, as a last finishing touch, I'm just going to take some little rhinestones and some really strong adhesive, and I'm going to add little rhinestones to my Christmas decorations on my tree. Now this relief paste I'm using is basically gel matte medium in a tube. I'm running out of this and I already have ordered some little fine line nib bottles to actually just decant some of my gel medium because it is exactly the same thing. I'm adding some rhinestones to my little balls on my Christmas tree, and on the little stars I'm adding some little star rhinestones. And I would say that this was this design finished. Now because I'm going to be making several of these, I only showed you one on camera, but when I actually make these I sit at a table and do every step on each card at the same time. So I do a bundle of these at one go. I mean, they look really cute. Look how that turned out. Something that was so easy to create that you could create that background for yourself. You could create your own tree like this. And look how lovely they turned out. They're much nicer than store-bought cards and they cost me nothing at all to make because they were from my craft stash. So now I just need to fill these in, stick them in envelopes and give them to my neighbours. And they look fabulous. I really like the cards this year. This is something I intend to do every year, and Chico just wanted to say goodbye. He was so patient waiting for me that when I came through to see him, he was all excited and wanted to show me he'd hidden something down the couch that he wanted to play with. So have a nice evening, and I will see you in the next video. To play with. So have a nice evening, and I will see you in the next video.